He asked me for a prenup to protect his 2 rental properties, and I said they were toxic. Then I inherited $800,000 from Grandma and asked for one myself. Now the wedding's off, he's with a nurse who thinks prenups are romantic, and everyone says I'm the hypocrite. I'm Brenda. I'm 29, and 2 years ago, I thought I had my whole life figured out. Now, I'm sitting here in my Dallas apartment wondering how the hell I ended up here while my ex-fiancé is living his best life with some basic chick who probably shops exclusively at Target. So, here's what everyone seems to forget when they're judging me. Donovan brought up a prenup first. Not me. Him. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, and out of nowhere, he drops this bomb about wanting to protect his assets. I work in client services making decent money. Nothing crazy. But he's in some finance thing pulling in way more than me. Plus, he's got these 2 rental properties worth like $400,000 combined. His retirement accounts, his house, all the stuff he accumulated before we even met. When he first mentioned it, I felt like someone had slapped me. Here I was planning our wedding, picking out flowers, thinking about our future kids, and he's basically telling me he doesn't trust me not to screw him over. What kind of message does that send? Hey babe, I love you so much. I want to spend forever with you. But also, I'm going to need some legal protection in case you turn into a greedy witch. The worst part was how he tried to justify it. He kept going on about his ex-wife, Ela, and how she took half his stuff in their divorce, including things with sentimental value, just to hurt him. And okay, I get that getting divorced sucks and people can be vindictive. But I'm not. I've never given him any reason to think I'm some gold-digging psycho who's just waiting to destroy his life. I told him straight up that prenups were toxic. They are. The whole concept is basically planning for failure before you even start. It's like saying, I love you, but not enough to actually trust you with my life. When you get married, you're supposed to become one unit. His money, my money, our money. That's what partnership means. But he kept pushing it, talking about how it would just protect what he had before we met, and everything we built together would be fair game. He even offered to pay for my own lawyer, like that was supposed to make me feel better, like I was some charity case who needed his permission to protect myself from his lack of trust. I cried. I'm not ashamed to admit it. The whole conversation hurt so badly because it felt like he was already planning our divorce before we'd even gotten married. I told him that if he really thought I was the type of person who would try to take his stuff in a divorce, then why was he even marrying me? I said that real love means trusting completely. And if he couldn't do that, then maybe we weren't ready for marriage. And you know what? It worked. He backed down completely. He said he was sorry for bringing it up, that he loved me more than he was scared of getting hurt again, and that we didn't need a prenup because he trusted me. I felt so vindicated, like we'd overcome this huge obstacle together and come out stronger. I even posted something on Facebook about how real relationships are built on trust and faith in each other, not legal documents and worst-case scenarios. I didn't mention the prenup directly, but anyone who knew us could read between the lines. I got like 50 likes and comments from people saying how lucky I was. The whole thing actually made me feel closer to him, like we'd been through this test and passed it together. I started planning the wedding with even more excitement because I knew he was all in. No reservations, no backup plans, just us committing to forever the way it's supposed to be. For months after that, things were perfect between us. We didn't fight about money or trust or any of that stuff. We were planning this beautiful wedding, looking at houses we might buy together, talking about kids and the future. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. About 3 months after we'd settled the prenup drama, I got a call that changed everything. My mom was crying so hard I could barely understand her. But eventually, I figured out what she was saying. Grandma Ruth was dead. Heart attack. Massive one. She was gone before the ambulance even got there. I couldn't believe it. Ruth was only 72 and had been completely healthy as far as anyone knew. She'd been posting pictures of her garden on Facebook the day before. The whole family was in shock, but honestly, I was devastated in a way that surprised even me. Ruth had always been my favorite person in the whole world. She was my mom's mom, but she treated me like I was something special from the day I was born. While my parents were always lecturing me about responsibility and making better choices, Ruth just loved me exactly as I was. She spoiled me rotten, took my side in every family argument, and made me feel like I could do no wrong. When other people criticized me for anything, dropping out of college after 2 years, switching jobs a lot, spending too much money on stuff, Ruth would just wave her hand and say they didn't understand my free spirit. She said I was too creative and independent for conventional life and that someday everyone would see how special I was. The funeral was horrible. Everyone was crying and sharing memories, but I felt like I was the only one who really understood what we'd lost. My sister Brianna kept going on about how Ruth taught her to knit, and my cousins were talking about her famous apple pie, but they were missing the point. Ruth wasn't just some sweet old lady who made good food. She was wise, and she saw people for who they really were. About a week after the funeral, I got a call from Ruth's lawyer asking me to come in for the reading of the will. I figured she'd left me something nice, maybe some jewelry or a few thousand because she always said I was her favorite grandchild, but I wasn't expecting anything major. When the lawyer started reading, I literally couldn't breathe. Ruth had left me everything. The house, the investments, her savings accounts, even her car. Everything. The total value was around $800,000, which meant I went from having maybe $15,000 in my checking account to being worth almost $1 million overnight. My sister, Brianna, looked like someone had punched her. My parents were trying to act supportive, but I could see the shock and maybe a little jealousy in their eyes, too. But the lawyer said Ruth's will was crystal clear and had been updated just 6 months before she died. She'd written a note that said I was getting everything because I was the only one who truly understood her heart. The first thing I felt wasn't excitement about the money. It was this overwhelming sense of validation. Ruth had seen something special in me that nobody else could see. And this inheritance was proof of that. It wasn't just money. It was love in financial form. It was Ruth's way of making sure I'd be taken care of and that her legacy would live on through the person who'd appreciated her most. When I told Donovan that night, he was amazing about it. He held me while I cried about missing Ruth, and he said he was so sorry for my loss but happy that she'd been able to provide for me. He didn't act weird about the money or make it about himself at all. He just focused on supporting me through my grief. But as the reality of having all this money started to sink in, I began to feel differently about a lot of things, especially about marriage and what it would mean to combine my life with someone else's. This wasn't just money we were talking about. This was my inheritance, my family's legacy, proof that Ruth had seen something special in me. When I started thinking about marrying Donovan without any protection for these assets, I felt physically sick. What if things went wrong between us? What if he turned out to be vindictive like his ex-wife? What if our marriage failed and he tried to take half of what Ruth had worked her entire life to build? I kept thinking about what Ruth would want. She'd been so proud of building wealth for her family, always talking about how important it was to leave something behind for the people you love. She used to say that money was a responsibility, that if someone trusted you with their life's work, you had to protect it. Ruth had chosen me specifically, not my sister, not my parents, not any of my cousins, me, because she saw that I understood the value of what she built and that I would respect her legacy. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that protecting this inheritance wasn't selfish. It was honoring Ruth's wishes. When I finally brought up the prenup idea to Donovan, I tried to explain why this situation was different from what we discussed before. His assets came from work, from being in the right place at the right time, or making good career choices. But my inheritance came from love, from family connection, from Ruth seeing something in me that made her want to provide for my future. I told him that Ruth wouldn't have wanted her money leaving the family if something happened to our marriage. It wasn't that I didn't trust him or that I was planning for divorce. It was that I had a responsibility to honor what Ruth had given me and make sure it stayed within her bloodline, like she would have wanted. I thought he'd understand. I thought he'd see how this was completely different from his paranoid request months earlier. But instead of being supportive, Donovan got this weird look on his face. He was quiet for a long time. And then he said something that completely blindsided me. He said that if I wanted a prenup to protect my inheritance, then he wanted one to protect his assets, too. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, "This is completely different, Donovan. You're talking about regular money that you made from working. I'm talking about my grandmother's legacy, about family wealth that has emotional meaning behind it." But he just kept shaking his head like I wasn't making sense. He said, "So you can protect your money, but I can't protect mine." But that wasn't what I was saying at all. I was saying that my inheritance was special and unique, while his stuff was just regular assets. Anyone could make money from a job or buy rental properties, but what Ruth had given me was irreplaceable. I reminded him that he'd already agreed to marry me without a prenup, that we'd already settled this issue months ago, and that bringing it back up now felt like he was going back on his word. I said that if he really loved me, he'd understand why my grandmother's money needed protection without making it about his own financial insecurity. But the more I tried to explain, the more resistant he became. He kept saying things like, "You can't have it both ways." And this is exactly what I was worried about. He started acting like I was being hypocritical. But he didn't understand the pressure I was under or how different these situations were. My family was already asking questions about the inheritance. My sister Brianna had made some pretty nasty comments about how she didn't understand why Ruth had left everything to me. My parents kept asking if I was sure about keeping all the money. The last thing I needed was my own fiancé trying to get access to it, too. The fights got worse after that. Every conversation about the prenup turned into this bigger argument about trust and fairness. Donovan started bringing up every disagreement we'd ever had about money, including times when I'd expected him to pay for dinner or vacations because he made more money than me. He called me hypocritical and selfish, but he didn't understand what I was dealing with. He kept saying that if I could demand protection for my assets, then he deserved the same consideration for his. But it wasn't the same thing at all. His money was just work money, regular income that he'd earned through normal career stuff. My inheritance was sacred. It represented Ruth's love for me, her belief in my potential, her desire to make sure I'd be taken care of. I tried to explain this to him over and over, but he refused to see the difference. He started acting like I was some kind of gold digger who'd been hiding my true nature until I got money of my own. He said I was showing my true colors and that he couldn't believe how quickly I'd changed after getting the inheritance. But I hadn't changed. I was still the same person who'd fallen in love with him 4 years earlier. The only thing that had changed was that I now had something precious to protect, something that represented way more than just money. When I told him I wasn't willing to sign any prenup that didn't protect my inheritance, but that I still didn't think he needed legal protection for his regular work assets, he completely lost it. He said I was being impossible and unfair, that I was asking him to take all the risk while I got all the security. He said he couldn't marry someone who had such a warped view of fairness. But I thought his view was the warped one. How was it fair for him to expect me to risk losing my grandmother's legacy just because he was paranoid about his ex-wife? I never thought he'd actually follow through on his threats, though. I thought he was just being dramatic and that he'd cool down once he had time to think about what really mattered. But I was wrong. 3 weeks after our last big fight, Donovan told me he was calling off the wedding. I was completely shocked. I thought we were just having a rough patch that would ultimately make us stronger. I never imagined he'd actually throw away 4 years together just because I wanted to protect my grandmother's money. When he moved out, I kept expecting him to change his mind. I thought he'd realize what he was giving up and come back ready to apologize, but he didn't come back. And the worst part was how he started talking about me to our mutual friends. He made it sound like I was some kind of manipulative person who'd been hiding my true nature until I got money.
Hey guys, real quick, I hope you're enjoying the story. Don't forget to subscribe, it would really help the page. Thanks for supporting.
After Donovan left, those were honestly the worst days of my life. I kept thinking he'd come to his senses, but instead, I started hearing through mutual friends that he was already dating someone new, some basic nurse named Claire, who apparently thought his prenup demands were smart and responsible. When I heard that, I wanted to throw up. Here I was, still processing the loss of my grandmother and dealing with our broken engagement, and he was already moving on with someone who had probably never owned anything more valuable than a used car, someone who had no idea what it meant to inherit family wealth or to be trusted with a legacy. I found out through my friend Jessica that when Donovan brought up wanting a prenup, this girl just agreed immediately. She apparently said she thought it showed he was financially responsible and that she wanted them both to feel secure. She even suggested they get separate lawyers to make sure everything was fair. When I heard that, I felt like the world had gone completely insane. Here was this nobody, making maybe $50,000 a year, agreeing to exactly what I'd done, what I called toxic and unloving. She was basically proving that she didn't really believe in the kind of deep, trusting love that real marriages are built on. But somehow everyone thought this made her mature and reasonable, while I was the difficult one. Nobody seemed to understand that my situation had been completely different. Claire didn't have family money to protect or a grandmother's legacy to honor. She could afford to be casual about money because she'd never had anything worth protecting. The worst part was seeing how happy Donovan looked in the pictures Jessica showed me from Facebook. He was looking at this basic girl like she was the most amazing woman in the world, when anyone could see she was just ordinary. Pretty enough, I guess, but nothing special. It killed me because I knew I was so much more than her. I had depth and complexity and a real family history. I'd been chosen by someone who'd lived a full life and had the wisdom to see who was truly special. But Donovan couldn't appreciate what he'd had with me. About a year after he left, things started going wrong with the inheritance in ways I never could have predicted. First, I got a call about major foundation problems with Ruth's house that needed $60,000 in repairs. Then, my financial advisor called with bad news about the investments being riskier than anyone had realized, and the market downturn had wiped out almost 30% of their value. But the worst thing happened when my sister Brianna decided to sue me over the inheritance. She claimed that Ruth hadn't been mentally sound when she made her will and that the money should be split equally among all the grandchildren. She said it wasn't fair that I'd gotten everything just because I'd been Ruth's favorite. The legal battle was a nightmare that dragged on for almost 2 years. Even though I eventually won because Ruth's will was completely legal, the lawyer fees ate up another $150,000. During those 2 years, my family was divided and angry, with some people taking Brianna's side and others supporting me, but everyone acting like the whole situation was somehow my fault. I had to sell Ruth's house because I couldn't afford the foundation repairs on top of everything else. The housing market was weird, and I ended up taking a loss just to get out from under the costs. By the time everything was settled, I had maybe $200,000 left from what had started as an $800,000 inheritance. Meanwhile, I kept hearing updates about Donovan and Claire. They'd gotten married in some small ceremony and bought this beautiful house together. Word was that his business was doing amazing and that being with someone supportive had made him more confident and successful. The most infuriating part was that everyone started treating me differently. My own family blamed me for the lawsuit drama, saying I should have just shared the inheritance from the beginning. My friends got tired of hearing me talk about how unfair everything had been. I realized that without Donovan, I didn't really have much of a social life. Most of our couple friends had sided with him after the breakup, and my single friends had moved on with their own lives. I was suddenly 30 years old, single, with less money than I'd started with, and no real support system. That's when I decided I needed a completely fresh start. I couldn't stay in a place where everyone knew my business and had opinions about what I should have done differently. So, I moved to Dallas, new city, new job, new chance to be around people who didn't know my history. But even now, 2 years later, I can't help thinking about how differently things could have gone if people had just understood what I was trying to do. If Donovan had been the man I thought he was, he would have seen that protecting Ruth's legacy was about love and responsibility, not greed. Everyone failed me when I needed them most: Ruth for leaving me money that caused nothing but problems, Donovan for being too weak to understand what I needed from him, my family for not supporting me when I was just trying to honor our grandmother's wishes, even my friends for not standing by me when things got difficult. I still think I was right about the whole prenup situation. My inheritance was different from his regular assets, and anyone with half a brain should have been able to see that. But apparently, I was surrounded by people who couldn't understand the difference between ordinary money and family legacy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I just ignored my instincts and signed whatever prenup Donovan wanted. Maybe we'd be married now, living in some nice house, planning for kids. But then I remember that if he couldn't support me when I needed to protect something as important as Ruth's legacy, he probably wasn't the right person for me anyway. At least I know who I am and what I stand for. I know that I'm the kind of person who honors the people who love me and who takes responsibility seriously when I'm trusted with something precious. That's more than I can say for most people, including the man who was supposed to love me enough to understand these things about me. The money's mostly gone now, but I still have my principles. I still know that I did the right thing, even if nobody else could see it. And someday, maybe I'll find someone who actually deserves the kind of deep, meaningful love I have to offer, someone who won't run away the first time.